Heads up.
So good morning, everybody. I first want to start off by praising Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Her work ethic and commitment will help us deliver President Trump's agenda and the American people's agenda. And we look forward to what she brings to the table. Now let's briefly recap the weekend and discuss what we're working on this week. The fake town halls hosted by the Democrats are quite frankly pretty sad. Constituents are being deceived by the Democrats. Democrats actually should be ashamed of their tactics. And instead of holding town halls in their district, they've decided to not speak to their constituents, which they should be speaking to their constituents. They are causing confusion with ours and hosting these fake town halls, yelling at a chair that nobody occupies, okay? The Democrats, however, have found their vision. The Democrats have found their leader, and the Democrats, April Fools. I forgot it was April Fools today. That was my attempt at an April Fool's joke. We know the Democrats have no vision, no message, and no leader. They're still lost. They're still out of touch. And they are still hell-bent on fighting against personalities, not the policies. Notice they don't fight on the policies. They fight the personality and they attack the person. But that's what you do when you're not winning on the issues. We keep giving the Democrats opportunities to join us on these common sense legislation, and they will actually have 2 more opportunities to join us this week. Like Rep. Darrell Issa's bill to ensure that rogue judges don't block the lawful exercise of executive power. You know, a single judge should not have the authority to unilaterally issue rulings that affect the entire nation. Left-leaning judges are trying to stall President Trump's efforts to fulfill the American people's mandate. House Republicans are restoring balance to the judicial system, standing up for integrity of our constitutional system, and upholding the checks and balances that safeguard our democracy. One of the most crucial safeguards of our democracy is our electoral system. An electoral system Americans have actually lost trust in because Biden helped more than 10 million illegal immigrants enter into our country. And he didn't do anything to ensure these illegal immigrants weren't voting in our elections. It's common sense that only U.S. citizens should participate in our election process. That's why House Republicans will pass the SAVE Act. We want to restore trust in America's election system and protect the ballot box. House Republicans are making America secure by passing the SAVE Act. If Democrats vote against this common sense bill, and I assure you they will, you should ask them these questions in the hallway. Ask them, why do they want illegal aliens to vote in our election system? Why do they refuse to protect Americans' constitutional right to vote? Why are they opposed to securing our elections? Interesting questions. Why do they stand against the American people's mandate? I'll save you some time. They don't have an answer because they're lost with no leader, no plan, and no vision. All they want to do is fight against our personalities. Now I will turn it over to freshman rep, Attorney General Derek Schmidt from the great state of Kansas to give us his perspective. No, you can't miss them. I gotta get some short people up here next time.
There you go. Well, thank you, Chairman McLean, and thank you all for coming out this morning. My name is Derek Schmidt. Glad to be with you today. We have a couple of bills on the floor this week that I wanted to offer some perspective on, first with respect to Representative Issa's bill, the No Rogue Rulings bill, the Nationwide Injunctions bill. I do think it's important to stay focused on what we are debating here. We're debating the universe of remedies that are available to a single district court judge when a plaintiff walks into the courtroom and asks them to disable some federal action, either federal law, a federal regulation, or a federal action by a federally elected official like the President of the United States. We are not debating whether people who are aggrieved can walk into court and seek redress for themselves. We are not debating whether a district judge has the ability to resolve a case or controversy properly brought in front of them. But this notion that a litigant seeking relief for themselves can walk into any district court in the country where they have standing and ask a judge, and perhaps other litigants similarly coordinated and situated can go into a different district court and ask a judge, and another in a different district court and ask another judge, and only one of those district court judges has to find a sufficient basis to enter an injunction that applies nationwide, grants relief to all of those litigants in every court, and stops the actions of the President of the United States or of a federal actor or of a duly enacted federal law or regulation. That is an extraordinary power. And that's why it's been used sparingly throughout most of our history. It's a relatively new concept in the past half century or so. I think the second Bush administration faced about half a dozen of those. The numbers vary a little because the definitions vary a little, but Harvard suggests half a dozen. There were 12 in the Obama administration. There were something like 70 in the first Trump administration. It dropped down to 14 under Biden, and now we've had at least 15 so far in the first 2 months of this Trump administration. It is an extraordinary remedy that is being abused. And so it's time for Congress to step in if the courts won't do it and restore balance so that this rare tool is in fact used rarely. And that's exactly what this bill does. With respect to the SAVE Act, which also will be on the floor this week, I have some experience, perhaps a bit unique. I was Attorney General of Kansas when we were in a position of our state having enacted a nearly identical statute. We were one of the first in the country that adopted, got a different acronym for it, but it was the same thing, documentary proof of citizenship at the time of first registering to vote. It was interesting because at the time that was adopted in Kansas almost 15 years ago now, it was a broadly bipartisan measure. It was supported overwhelmingly in our legislature. It was supported by Democrat leadership in the legislature. And then, for some reason, folks in the other party had a change of heart. They turned on it. They became bitter opponents and actually wound up backing the litigants who challenged it in court. We defended that all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, which denied cert in the case. We didn't handle the case all along. It was handled by others in its early iterations, so we had a peculiar record we had to deal with, an imperfect record that we had to deal with. But here's the important point for this week. What the court said is that federal law preempted the state from requiring proof, documentary proof, more than just somebody's word on an affidavit, that they are a citizen lawfully qualified to vote just once, not every time, just once at the time you show up to first register. We have the ability to fix that federal law by withdrawing the preemption. That is what this bill does, and actually replaces it with a requirement. Look, it really is this simple. This is about enforcing the law that is already on the books that prohibits non-citizens from voting, particularly in federal elections. We don't say you got to be 21 years old to drink, and therefore when you show up and want to go in the bar, you sign an affidavit saying, I'm 21. We say, show us your ID. Show us documentary proof. Surely we should have at least that standard in place for protecting the sanctity of our elections. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. District courts issued more universal injunctions and temporary restraining orders during February 2025 alone than in the first 3 years of the Biden administration. The American people's trust in our court system has hit a record low, according to recent Gallup polling. And even Chuck Schumer is touting that he helped confirm 235, quote, progressive judges who are, quote, ruling against Trump time after time. Somebody should advise the Senate minority leader that that is the problem. Judges are supposed to be blind as to who's in front of them and just apply the law. You don't appoint judges to advance your political agenda. This admission and the sheer number of rulings against President Trump's policies should raise major red flags for every American who values our Constitution and the separation of powers. While Schumer's cheers clearly these partisan rulings that tie the hands of the President of the United States and block the agenda of 77 million Americans. House Republicans are working to root out bias in our legal system and stop nationwide injunctions that threaten the separation of powers that our founders intended. It's absolutely ridiculous that a district judge in San Francisco can issue an injunction stopping the president from reducing the size of the federal government workforce in Washington, D.C. It makes no sense whatsoever. That's why we're going to pass Congressman Iss's No Rogue Rulings Act this week to rein in activist judges, to return district courts to their appropriate role, and to restore constitutional balance to the three branches. The policies of 77 million Americans, that 77 million Americans voted for, should not be held hostage by one unelected district court judge. It's as simple as that. By passing Congressman Iss's bill and Congressman Chip Roy's SAVE Act this week, House Republicans are once again returning common sense to Washington and delivering on the mandate the American people gave us in November. And with that, the leader.
Thank you, Whip. We have another full week working through our legislative agenda while we also are urging the Senate to continue moving on the budget reconciliation process. This week, they will be taking up the budget that we sent over weeks ago. And of course, when you look at where the budgets are, we went through a lot of work within our conference, meeting with members that represent all different factions within our conference to come up with the ultimate targets that were laid out in our budget to direct 11 different committees in the House to take action in reconciliation. The Senate needs to go through that same process. They've got similar dynamics in the Senate. They've got fiscal hawks, moderates, the same kind of issues that they're going to have to resolve. But ultimately, it's only when the House and Senate come together are we going to be able to deliver that big package for President Trump to get this economy back on track for the American people. And ultimately, that's who we're fighting for. We're fighting for those hardworking families who have been struggling too long under the weight of the failed far-left policies of President Biden that are still lingering. The Democrats, when they were in charge, when they added trillions in spending, inflation, interest rates, all the things that are still crushing families, we are finally starting to address those things one at a time. And it's taken time, but we're 2 months in, and you can already see the progress. But there's a lot more work to do. And so we're not slowing down in our majority. We're not slowing down with the bills we're bringing. Of course, this week, the No Rogue Judges Act, and I think it's been laid out really well, the abuses that we've been seeing with some of these district court judges that just feel their role is to try to stop the duly elected president of the United States and Donald Trump because they disagree with his policies, as opposed to carrying out their duty to interpret the Constitution and the laws of this country. And if they're going to overstep their boundaries, should they be able to have literally at a district level an ability to change the law for the entire country, when ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court's going to have to decide many of these big issues. But we're taking that up. We're also, of course, going to continue to fight for the integrity of the vote to make sure that people that have come here illegally by the millions cannot register and vote, and that there will be actual safeguards and consequences for people who come to this country and vote illegally. So we're going to bring that bill again, give everybody an opportunity to state their position on that as well. But as you look at reconciliation, one of the things we're looking to do is to finally start to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending. Obviously, the mandatory spending side is what we look at heavily on the reconciliation side, but we've been working closely with the President's DOGE Commission. And for anybody who didn't see it, I thought it was a very refreshing exercise to watch Elon Musk and all the other leaders of DOGE come together and do, in essence, a town hall meeting, talking about the methods, the methodology, and the sophistication that is being used to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending. You know, when people fill out their taxes in just 2 weeks, You know, there's a lot of anger and frustration when people send their money into Washington, and they wonder when they hear these stories of, you know, the billions of dollars in wasteful programs. These aren't just anecdotes. As Elon and the DOGE commission members have been finding out, it's rampant throughout every agency in federal government, whether it's just inefficiencies, which is bad enough, or flat out fraud, abuse, and corruption. They're identifying billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in waste that can and should be rooted out, because every dollar of waste here in Washington, number one, is deficit spending that we would not be adding to our deficit, but it's money that can be reinvested to make programs work the way they were intended by Congress and by the president. And so to see how serious they take these jobs, and many of these people are very accomplished in their own rights, people that have their own careers and are stepping aside and doing this work to make government work better for all the people of this country. I was very encouraged by it. I wish everybody in the country saw it, because when you watch how the left is trying to demonize not the waste in government, I wish the left was as fervent at going after waste in government as they're going after the people that are trying to root out the waste in government. Elon's giving up a lot to do this. As an individual, you see the personal attacks, death threats that are being made against him. That's real, and it's disgusting and disgraceful. But it also shows he must clearly be touching on something to the core. How much waste is out there that somebody would threaten his life because he's trying to find out and root out that waste? So we're going to continue working with DOGE to root out the waste, lock as much of it into law as possible. If we can fit it in a budget reconciliation, we surely will. If it's going to come later in a rescissions package, then we're going to do it as best as we can to achieve those real savings for the taxpayers of this country who are counting on us.
Just give you a little more info, and then we'll take questions. I want to thank our great colleague from Kansas, former Attorney General. He knows that of which he speaks, and Congressman Schmidt gives great voice to this. We're talking about this problem of rogue rulings, and you know, the Democrats, our colleagues here, they talk all about this so-called constitutional crisis that they see around every tree. They don't like President Trump's policies, and so that's their catchphrase they use for everything. But there really is a constitutional crisis that's developing. It's not the one that the Democrats claim, though. Listen to these numbers, and we've shared them before. 67% of all injunctions issued by district court judges against a president since the year 2000 were issued against one man, and his name's President Donald J. Trump. 92% of those injunctions against the president were issued by Democrat-appointed judges. There's a problem. I've mentioned before, I was a constitutional law litigator, routinely would run into judges that I would describe as activists, but it was much more rare than it is now, and it's a problem that has been noted needs to be addressed. Under the existing framework, one singular district court judge out of 677 of them, anywhere in America, can subvert the will of the duly elected president carrying out his constitutional duties. And they're doing that. And so we've got to step into this. Despite the American people's wholesale rejection of Democrat ideas at the ballot box, you have activist judges who are abusing the system to legislate from the bench. That's effectively what an activist judge is. This is not how the system our founders designed is supposed to work. Under our Constitution, we have three co-equal branches of government, each with the ability to provide a check on the other. And we do have that authority. Democrats seem to have forgotten that. I mentioned at a press conference or a gaggle, maybe it was last week with all of you, I can't remember, so many of these, but somebody asked me repeatedly about impeachment, and they asked me about our authority under the Constitution. What authority do we have under Article 3? The Congress is given the authority to determine, define, fund all lower courts, only the Supreme Court has mentioned itself in the Constitution, and the lower courts are within the purview of the Congress. And I was asked, and I offered the answer, yes. I mean, we could defund those courts. I wasn't saying, let me clarify, I wasn't saying that we're doing that. I was trying to describe what the Constitution says. Go read it for yourselves. We have broad scope. We have all authority over the lower courts, okay? We're not defunding courts, and we're not doing anything other than limiting in this legislation the ability of a judge to issue a nationwide injunction, because that is the problem that has gotten totally out of control. And we need this check on the judiciary, and I think we're going to prove that on the floor. One activist judge should not issue a nationwide injunction against the president's policies, and these district courts have to stay within their constitutional bounds. The next act we talked about that'll be on the floor is the SAVE Act, and we've been here and done this, but we have to do it again because we never got it through the Senate last time. But this is the second time in less than a year congressional Democrats will have the opportunity to do something that 87% of the American people demand that Congress does. Only U.S. citizens should decide U.S. elections. It is in federal law, but it is not always enforced, and you need further enforcement. Why? Because we have to make sure that the law is complied with, and this will require a reasonable measure of having an ID to prove your citizenship. It's Democrats say it's already illegal to vote as a citizen, but that doesn't mean that you don't need further enforcement. We don't rely on the integrity of teenagers trying to purchase a six-pack at the liquor store, right? We require them to provide ID to prove they're old enough to make that purchase. We require ID for almost everything in society, and almost everybody has one. And we're just saying that this is a very simple common sense measure. States are barred from even asking to verify citizenship status or on voter registration forms currently. So we have to fix that. And the states can't just rely on the integrity of the registrant. We need a safeguard in the system. So the SAVE Act closes that massive loophole. It codifies President Trump's executive action to secure our voter registration process, and it protects the voices of American voters. If we don't have free and fair and safe and secure elections, then we have nothing in a republic. And so that's where we're moving forward, and we'll see where the Democrats stand on it. I'll take questions. Yes.
President Trump this week in an interview with my colleague Christine Walker said that when he repeatedly brings up the idea of running for a third term, that he is not joking. You are a constitutional law expert. Is there a legal constitutional path for him to seek a third term, and would you support him if he went down that road?
Well, I just told everybody to read the Constitution. There's a constitutional path. You have to amend the Constitution to do it, and that's a high bar. The president and I have talked about this, joked about it. He's joked about it with me on stage before. We take him at his word. I understand why so many Americans do wish that he could run for a third term, because he's accomplishing so much in this first 100 days that they wish it could go on for much longer. But I think he recognizes the constitutional limitations, and I'm not sure that there's a move about to amend the Constitution. Yeah.
Do you think that the president should move forward tomorrow with tariffs?
He's made very clear that he's doing this in the executive branch under his executive authority, and it doesn't involve Congress in that way. Look, you have to trust the president's instincts on the economy, okay? And why? This isn't blind faith. Remember what he accomplished in the first administration. Before COVID, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world, not the U.S., the whole world. Every demographic was doing better because we cut taxes, we cut regulations, and we made a better economic environment for everybody to succeed. And he is going about that same plan to bring that about, and tariffs is a component of that. And we'll see how it all develops. I mean, the reciprocal tariff policy is one that makes a lot of common sense. I mean, you look at the trade disparity between many nations, and much of this began after World War II, and the rationale apparently was, well, we need to rebuild Europe, and America emerges as the great superpower, so we should have this imbalance. It's fair. This is what we need. Well, that carried on for generations, and we're well beyond World War II now, and this is a different world. It's a much more integrated, complex economy, and the president's absolutely right when he says that we have to think about America's interest first, because if we don't, we're not going to maintain our status as the great superpower. And when he says, let's have free trade and fair trade, I think the reciprocal tariff policy makes sense. If somebody has 100+% tariff on imports of U.S. goods, and we have virtually nothing. Why don't we settle that balance? If we raise and match their tariff policy, I think ultimately what happens is you get back down to a free trade agreement, that these countries that have engaged in this disparity, this raw deal for Americans for so long, it'll get their attention, and they'll, I think, reduce their tariffs on us. Then you get back to a free and fair trade situation. So, look, we'll see what happens. I think it's going to go forward, and it may be rocky in the beginning, but I think that this will make sense for Americans and it will help all Americans. So, yes, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Trump says that Elise Stefanik will be rejoining your leadership team and that you are very enthusiastic to be having her remain in the House. What role will she be playing on your leadership team, given that she has already relinquished her past leadership?
Yeah, we're trying to sort that out. Elise is a dear friend, trusted colleague. She's a super talent, and she has always brought a lot to the table. And she stepped down from her conference chair role, and on her important committee assignments, she was in line to have a gavel on some of those. And the circumstances changed. So recognizing her talent, I said I would love to invite her back immediately to the leadership table. All the leadership posts are filled at the moment, so we're trying to figure out some creative role for Elise to play, because I think that helps the whole body. I think it helps our conference, and it puts her in a position where she can be of her highest and best use. Scott, as you know, every single day as Speaker, what I try to do is make sure all of our members are of their highest and best use. We try to match skill sets with positions, and it's an imperfect thing, but we work through it. And what happened with Elise is we're dealing with, and we're going to make her a very valuable and important member of this conference, as she always has been. And I'm excited about that. I am. I'm glad to have her remain with us. So, last question, very back.
On the topic of activist judges, does the legislation touch on using artificial intelligence at all in this regard? And, semantic analysis of artificial intelligence is very high. And, is it theoretically possible to be able to use AI in a judiciary capacity?
Wow. I think they're going to replace all the lawyers before they do the judges, and I'm worried about that. I'm a recovering attorney myself. I don't know. That's a great question. They say AI is going to change everything. I certainly hope that we don't have AI determining the outcome of cases, though. I think you got to rely on the system and rely on human judgment for these things. But we'll see. That's a brave new world question. I don't have the answer yet. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.